Hello, I'm Chris Fowler for Sports Century. All he ever wanted to be was a famous football player, and so he became one. Not for leading the league in tackles or for being named the Super Bowl MVP, or even for anchoring one of the stiffest defenses in NFL history. Ray Lewis found fame during the investigation of a double homicide. But then throughout his tumultuous life, murder has been a recurring and tragic theme.
As a football player, Ray Lewis may be the best defensive football player of all time.
I've been watching pro football now for 60 years. I've never seen a better middle linebacker, ever.
He has that animal instinct. Oh, that's my meal. I gotta get my meal.
He's kind of a human tackling machine. It's like sharks are eating machines. I feel like Ray is built to tackle.
On the field, he plays the game violent. He runs into guys, smacks them around, and gets up and let them know he smacked them around.
It's hard for people to fathom that anybody that plays so as ferociously as he does on the field could not have done what he was accused of doing off the field.
Moments ago, Atlanta police announced that they have arrested and charged Baltimore Ravens football player Ray Lewis with the murders of two Decatur men in Buckhead last night following the Super Bowl.
In the early morning of January 31st, 2000, Ray Lewis, with 10 others, left an Atlanta nightclub and began piling into his 37-foot stretch limo. One member of the entourage, Reginald Oakley, was arguing with several men from Akron, Ohio.
Members of the Akron group attracted the attention of the Lewis group and not the other way around. By their own admission, they were mouthing off.
Oakley is kind of a sharp tongue and didn't have any problem getting into it verbally with people passing by on the street.
Ray Lewis says he tried to stop the fight. He testified that at one point he managed to get Reginald Oakley back into the limousine to try and stop the fight. But it didn't work.
Somebody peeked their head in the limo and said something about, come get these guys if something's going to happen out there.
Lewis shoved Oakley into the limo, while another companion, brandishing a small knife, faced the irate Akron men, who had been joined by two friends, Richard Lawler and Jacinth Baker. Lawler shouted an insulting expletive. Baker, holding a champagne bottle, turned and came back towards the limo, and the Akron group followed.
Reginald Oakley charged out of the limousine, and he was hit over the head by a champagne bottle. And then after that, it was kind of like all bets were off.
I remember getting choked, kicked, punched, a couple things. When he was choking me, I think I closed my eyes or something. When I opened back my eyes up, I didn't see nothing. But when I got free and crawled back to the car and got in, I'm thinking I didn't get away with my life.
Jason Baker was chased and then slammed to the ground and punched by somebody down by the intersection. Right before he died, Richard Lawler came wandering over, having been mortally wounded, and looked and then just fell right near him.
Atlanta 911, I heard 2 minutes ago. What you mean they down? Okay, what's going on? Grandview Piedmont, they just got hit in the head with champagne bottles and 2 guys laying out in the street.
As Lawler and Baker lay bleeding to death from stab wounds to the chest and abdomen, Lewis's group re-entered the limo when one of the Akron men fired at the vehicle with a handgun.
One round after another, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, everybody's gonna die in this car. Cause I'm like, we ain't going nowhere. I'm like, we in a coffin. That's all I kept thinking. I said, they just might as well put some dirt over the car cause it's a coffin.
Shortly after finding a knife at the scene, police identified the bullet-riddled limo in a hotel parking lot about a mile away. Blood traces of Baker, Oakley, and Joseph Sweeting were discovered in the vehicle. Now, blood from Baker and Oakley was also found in the hotel lobby bathroom and a room at another hotel registered under the name of Ray Lewis. Police questioned the 3-time Pro Bowler later that morning.
Lewis was evasive. Didn't remember anybody's names.
He was not cooperative. He was not truthful, and the investigators suspected at that point that he was not telling the truth.
Ray Lewis lied to the police early on, and they knew that he lied. And from then on, things in the legal system went terribly awry for him.
The police had begun to form an impression of Mr. Lewis as an uncooperative witness. So they went back to headquarters, they reported this to their supervisors, and the supervisor said, let's arrest him.
Later that day, Lewis was charged with 2 counts of homicide, and on February 10th, Oakley and Sweeting were also charged. It was the second time in a month that an NFL player faced a murder rap. Early in January, Carolina Panthers receiver Ray Caruth had been indicted for planning the killing of his pregnant girlfriend.
One of the worst things Ray Lewis had going for him was Ray Caruth. They were immediately lumped into the same category. It's the Rays. They were poster boys for everything that was wrong with the NFL player.
We've had all these stories about professional athletes, particularly National Football League players, getting in trouble with the law. It was just like one in a series of things that we've seen all along in society.
Gosh, have we ever heard of a football player trying to get out of a murder before? Well, yes. And they thought, we don't want this to be another O.J.
They did have blood. They did have a weapon. They had tested the weapon. They had eyewitness testimony. It's basic building blocks of a criminal case.
I was shocked. When I found out, I couldn't believe it. I was like, not Ray Lewis, I know.
I think it was the night before. Club 112. We was outside in the parking lot. People start spraying mace, and people start running. First thing Ray said, hey man, I'm too pretty to go up in the club where they spraying mace, and I ain't about no fighting. His exact words. I'm not about no fighting. I hit people for money on the football field. I ain't hit nobody out here for free.
Here he was, the leading tackler in the NFL, and nobody knows who he is. All of a sudden, general America, the rest of America that isn't paying attention to football, sees Ray Lewis, the guy in the orange jumpsuit. That had guilty all over it.
When Ray Lewis was first arrested for these 2 murders, his friends swore up and down, because of Ray Lewis's past, where he had lost friends in the past to violence, that there was no way that he was ever going to do that to anybody.
Ray Lewis's formative years in Lakeland, Florida, were repeatedly scarred by violence and death. When he was 15, his grandmother was accidentally shot in the leg outside a neighborhood bar while her companion was killed. 3 years later, police fatally shot Ray's close friend, Remy King, during a bank holdup. Another childhood comrade, Timmy Moore, was murdered in 1996 while making a drug deal. To memorialize the deaths of King and Moore, Lewis bears tattoos on his chest and right shoulder.
I'm sure it affected him very badly because those were kids that he played with. Those were kids that he grew up with. They all played football together. They didn't walk to school together, they rode home together.
Having somebody close to you die, particularly in a violent way like that, I think gives you some kind of a medal. And I think it gave that to Ray Lewis, some kind of protective medal that everything else that goes on isn't going to matter as much because of what's happened to him and his friends in the past.
In April of 1996, a month after Moore's murder, violence and death again brushed close to Lewis. Close friend and University of Miami roommate Marlon Barnes and another student, Timwanika Lumpkins, were bludgeoned to death by her ex-boyfriend.
When I opened the door, I couldn't open the door. His body was pressed against the door. And when I opened the door, I saw a bunch of red. It was blood, but I thought it was some spilled juice because you're not expecting anything like that. And to see somebody beaten to death like that when their face is completely like just torn up, it was very tough.
He disappeared for a couple of days. Went to Daytona, was just riding around, driving, crying, dialing Marlon Barnes' beeper number out of memory, trying to find him, not believing it, put his fist through a hotel room wall.
When Ray did come home, it was like 2 days later, and he just, he was crying, his face was all puffed out, his eyes was big, and I said, Ray, never in your life do that to me again. And he said, Mama, I just had to be alone.
On the day of his fallen friend's funeral, Lewis, conflicted by the forces of grief and joy, chose to attend his draft party because he felt Barnes would have wanted it that way. Lewis still honors Barnes They're wearing a picture of him on a T-shirt under his Ravens uniform.
A lot of people don't know, you know, how he wake up in cold sweats, how he have nightmares from Marley all the way up to now.
He tries to talk to him before the game, to the point that he's come out on the field on occasion crying because he's gone to a very dark place to gather his fuel for Sundays, an exceptionally dark place. He's talking to a man he loved who died, who was murdered brutally in the home that they lived in.
The emotional battery, pain, trauma, if you will, that Ray Lewis went through early in his life would very easily, just for survival, create a situation in which he would want to shut down. Shut down in the sense of focusing on the game.
He just wants to be hard. He wants to be the hardest man on that football field on Sunday. Here he is right now, the glowing nuclear epicenter of the most ravenous defense for 1 year that any NFL field has ever seen. He wants to be exceptionally hard, tough, seen as somebody not to be messed with.
Ray was born in May of 1975 to 15-year-old Buffy Jenkins and Ray Jackson, who was 19. When he was still in grammar school, his father abandoned the family. Upon entering Lakeland's Kathleen High School, he took the name of the man his mother was dating and became Ray Lewis.
You always still want to be a part of your father, no matter how much you resent him. So that probably motivated him more to the point of like, I'm going to show him, I'm going to prove to him, he's going to be proud that I was his son.
With the guy not around, I'm sure that Ray felt an awesome loneliness and perhaps a sense of abandonment. There was just this sense that the guy had left me, and the heck with him.
There's a poisonous feeling there. It's not indifference. There's a hatred there and an anger in his voice when he talks about it, even still.
When Lewis discovered that Ray Jackson dominated the gridiron and wrestling mat at the same high school he was attending, he privately declared war on the athletic memory of the man who walked out on him.
He wanted to erase his daddy name completely off the record book, you know, and he did it. And every record that his father had, he broke it. So his father's name is erased, and Ray's name is there.
About a 15-foot picture hanging up in the gym of him now. If he said he was going to do something like that there, he pretty much did it.
If my dad rejected me, he could have just sat in the corner and said, well, you know, I'm not any good. But no, Ray said, okay, you didn't want me, I'm going to prove to you that you probably blew it.
Here was someone who felt he had been wronged or not treated with respect and set out to overcome that and to perhaps evoke a sense of revenge through his own success.
The rage inside Lewis also burned bright on Kathleen High's football field, where he starred as a linebacker, running back, and kick returner. Yet Lewis sat at the end of the bench in the classroom. Recruiters backed off as he repeatedly scored poorly on the college entrance exam. When he finally qualified on the 5th attempt, only the University of Miami had a scholarship open.
Ray makes a statement the first week he's there, I'm going to be the best linebacker to ever play at the University of Miami.
He was one of those guys who would go 110% every single play, not only in games, but 110% in practice. It's hard to find that in a player, because a lot of players, you'll take a play off here, you take a play off there. Ray wasn't one of those guys, and I admired that, and I respected that.
That effort paid off when starting middle linebacker Robert Bass was injured in the second game of the 1993 season. Lewis became the first true freshman to start at Miami in 5 years.
Ray came in wide-eyed, but focused and intent on making his name.
He walked in the hall all wide-eyed. He looked around and he said, Canes too. And I looked at him, I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, listen, son, if you're going to be the middle backer at the University of Miami, it's got to be your huddle. It was like something clicked in it.
After football practice, after classes, after weight training, he'd be in the dorm room throwing playing cards on the floor of the dorm, and whatever number came up, he'd do that many push-ups. And he'd do 1,000 a night.
Ray's an animal. Ray's a machine. You've never seen a more finely conditioned athlete. He loves it. He loves to go to the weight room. He loves to go out and run. He loves to go out and just
active. Ray was always a great leader. He had huge respect in the locker room because not only did he walk the walk, but he talked the talk.
After leading the Big East in tackles as a sophomore and junior, Lewis, an All-American, entered the 1996 NFL Draft. At 6'1" and 230 pounds, his size was questioned. 25 names were announced before he was selected by the Ravens. In his second season, he erased all doubts when his 210 tackles were the most in the league.
Ray's whole life, he's faced people telling him what he can't do. You're too small, you're too this, you're too that. And at every turn, he's used that as a catalyst to say, well, I'm just going to have to show you too.
It started with, I'm going to be better than my father at wrestling, and he was. I'm going to be the best University of Miami linebacker there's ever been, and he was. I'm going to win a championship, and he has. I'm going to the Hall of Fame. He's headed that way.
His quarterback, you very seldom see him until, you know, you see him getting off way. You'd see Big 52.
I've never seen a player like Ray Lewis. I've never seen a more dedicated player, devoted to his craft. Anywhere, including Jim Brown.
When you combine his knowledge of the game, the ability to inspire others, and then he is a physical fool. The physicality is like a Dick Butkus.
He became an impact player the way middle linebackers were years ago. I just like the intensity that he plays with.
Ray only has one goal. That's to be the best middle linebacker ever. Matter of fact, I interviewed him one time and I asked him what was his goal. He just said, when I die, I want for him to put on my tombstone, Ray Lewis, the best linebacker ever.
If Ray Lewis, the all-pro linebacker, was forged in a childhood of abandonment, violence, and death, there also was the responsibility for his younger brother and 3 sisters.
When I was working, Ray used to have to get up at night, make sure the kids had breakfast, and he used to sit on the stool with ponytails going every which way.
He had to be like the father figure for them. And so she was working, and so he would have to babysit and keep the kids and look after them.
But Ray was in the NFL, the second year, he was going to his third. He took his sister, Khadijah, to the high school prom. And when he walked in, nobody could believe Ray Lewis. Not this guy. You know, he's a big-time celebrity. Why would he bring his sister to the prom? But that was an honor for Ray.
When Lewis was a high school junior, his home life changed dramatically. His mother had remarried and moved away from Lakeland, but Ray chose to stay at Kathleen High and went to live with his grandparents, Elise and Gillis McKinney.
Ray did not grow up in the ghetto. He grew up in a loving community, a hard-working community, a community with pride. Ray didn't come out of a place, a street that you got to walk on where you got to duck bullets and things. That's not true.
Ray was always raised in the church. He was a member of FCA, fellow Christian athletes. He knew that Mrs. McKinney expected him to be up on Sunday morning and get to that church.
But if Lewis stayed out of trouble in Lakeland, he couldn't avoid it at the University of Miami, where he was twice investigated for abusive behavior. In October of 1994, he allegedly grabbed his girlfriend, Tatiana McCall, by the throat. And the following September, allegedly grabbed Kimberly Arnold by the shoulder in an effort to restrain her in a quarrel with McCall. Charges were not filed in either case.
The girl said that he had hit her, and they called the campus police when I was right there, and the guy did not touch the girl.
In each incident, it was always more than one girl. You know, one girl was trying to pull him this way, the other girl was trying to pull him that way.
There may be 2 or 3 too many women in his life, and that the volatility comes from the number of women, not from the women themselves.
Trouble with women followed Lewis into the pros. 2 months before the Atlanta killings, he was accused of assault in a brawl involving 3 women in a Baltimore bar. After the state attorney's office dropped the charges, a jury awarded Lewis $10,000 in 2002, saying the civil suit brought by 2 of the women was filed in bad faith.
A fight broke out between some girls that were there, and as we was walking through the crowd, this girl just actually looked up and looked at Ray. Yeah, that's Ray Lewis and all his friends. The next thing you know, she was like, yeah, you hit me too. I'm like, what?
How much of a coincidence is it for someone to be in the wrong place at the wrong time consistently? There were little hints of what was sort of below the surface of Ray Lewis, I think, in these incidents.
The image of Lewis as an abuser is disputed by friends, family, and the Baltimore Ravens. Lewis, who has remained a bachelor, is a father to 4 children by 2 women. 3 sons live with their mother in Orlando. His daughter lives with her mother near Ray's suburban Baltimore home.
I think he's a great father and great son. Really, now the media people who've been brutalizing him would know that. They wouldn't have the foggiest idea what makes him tick as a human being.
They don't see Ray with his family. They don't see when Ray has his kids with him, you know, enjoying family time. They don't see when we have Bible study at Ray's house.
When Ray steps off the field, he's a gentle lamb.
Ray, can I play with you with your toys? Yeah. Where they at? Come on, I'm gonna follow you.
He puts a lot of time, energy, and money into the community. As far as charities, he helps the kids around here.
Come on. Hey, get in train.
Kids is special to Ray. You know, they do a lot for him. And I think they keep him strong to when he go back to know when he was a kid. And he know what he had to go through. So when he be around other kids, he gives them that joy and peace that he didn't have.
In contrast to his loving moments with children are those in which Lewis partied heavily. One X-rated party, which included Atlanta murder co-defendant Joseph Sweeting, was videotaped in 1999.
It certainly contradicted the people who were trying to paint him as this family man who was settling down and taking care of his kids and everything. But what was shown in that video was not a crime.
Hey, look, we was in Cancun. This is the off season. We was having a good time. This was my tape. I was out there partying. Ray was with me. Ray wasn't naked. What do you think a man's supposed to go to Cancun and be like, oh, I'm a football player, don't touch me?
He does talk endlessly about his family, about his kids, talks endlessly about God, and people can't juxtapose that with dancing, you know, on a beach in Mexico with a bunch of strippers.
Ray has some issues. Ray likes to party. Ray likes to hang out. At the time before the murders, Ray had his little entourage, and you could see it growing.
He hangs out with hard people, or he did hang out with hard people before this happened. There's a certain honor in that. It's sort of like carrying a gun into a nightclub. It gives off the correct scent, the scent you want, the testosterone scent, the masculine scent. And so you're soft if you didn't come from scarred streets.
Ray Lewis ain't no thug, you know, I'm a thug. All my boys, we rebels, you know what I'm saying? We live this lifestyle. Whatever his goal in the NFL world to be, good luck to you. God bless you to play the game, stay out the street, don't play in the street.
He's always wanted fame and been unapologetic about it. That's the reason he was there that night in Atlanta, in a limo, in a fur, with women.
The Ravens won't say they were concerned publicly, but I know for a fact that they were. And that if Ray Lewis had made it back from Atlanta without being arrested, they would have had a meeting with him to start talking about some of the people he hung around. There was definitely concern.
It was the scariest, loneliest time of his life. They put him in an area where there were a bunch of crazy people, so that there were people in there masturbating and screaming at the top of their lungs and doing all sorts of things. He says he wouldn't wish that on anybody.
When I went to that jail and I saw Ray Lewis behind that glass wall, it was probably one of the most depressing moments of my life. He said, Mr. Wright, I haven't killed anybody.
Yet at first, the evidence against him mounted quickly. Within hours of the killings, Atlanta police collected bloodstains, a weapon at the scene, and knew Lewis had lied to them.
He called them back and said, wait, I do have some more information. I do want to help you more. And the police said, okay, we're on our way out. And showed up not with steno pads and pens, but with an arrest warrant.
It didn't seem that they wanted to listen to what Lewis was going to say. They were interested in knowing who stabbed who. That was all they kept hammering away at Lewis with, was who stabbed who. And Lewis maintained that whole time, hey, look, I don't know. I don't know who did the stabbing. I didn't see.
He refused to cooperate with the detectives who were trying to find out what happened. So I don't feel sorry for a guy who's in jail because he won't answer questions.
With Lewis incarcerated, the police determined that Sweeting and Oakley had recently purchased knives at a nearby sporting goods store. When eyewitnesses describe both men as active participants in the fight, they were charged along with Lewis.
From the beginning, Mr. Lewis has deliberately lied, misled us, withheld information.
We will continue to investigate these horrible killings and will not be swayed by fame or status or wealth of the suspects.
Going into the case, the prosecution said they could put knives in the hands of Reginald Oakley and Joseph Sweeting, and that they could put Ray Lewis participating in the fight. Legally, they can all be convicted of being involved in a murder.
There was never any indication or evidence or even a suggestion that Lewis himself wielded a knife or even outwardly encouraged it.
Most damaging were statements by the limo driver, Dwayne Fassett, that placed Lewis in the middle of the brawl.
His story changed. It got better for the state every time. He went from not seeing anything to seeing a fight that Ray Lewis might have been involved in which Ray Lewis might have thrown a punch or two.
What he ended up saying at the peak of his recollections was that he saw Mr. Lewis hitting one of the victims. He saw Mr. Oakley tussling with another one of the victims, and I believe Mr. Sweeting was going between the two.
He also said that he heard one of them say, "I stabbed mine," when they're driving away in the limousine, and the other guy respond, "I stabbed mine too."
Fassett overheard Lewis telling everybody in the limousine to shut up, to keep their mouth shut, that his football career was not going to end that way.
When the coroner's initial report came back, it coincided exactly with what the witnesses were saying about the manner of punching.
You put the little blade in between your fingers, and you let the guy have it, and you let him have it in the meat of the torso where you ain't going to miss.
Sweeting, a friend of Lewis since college, and Oakley, an acquaintance, had accumulated serious rap sheets. Oakley's offenses included assaulting a police officer and possession of a stolen vehicle. Sweeting had served 3 prison terms, was wanted for questioning a Miami-Dade County drug-related murder.
He had been linked to some street gangs that were involved in drive-by shootings, to jewelry store, armed robberies.
In a competition on the football field, I would bet on Lewis against the two of them. In a competition on the street, I would go with Oakley and Sweeting every time.
In the murder trial, which began in May of 2000, the prosecution's case against Lewis began to show cracks. Jeff Gwen, a member of the Akron group who had told police he saw Lewis fighting with the victims, changed his story and said the player was tussling with them. The case against Lewis came unglued when Fassett, the limo driver, testified.
When he came in, the place was quiet as could be. He sat down, he rubbed his face, he breathed hard. He was looking like a man waiting to be executed.
You could just watch him fall to pieces on the stand. It's like watching a sandcastle come apart. You know, just pieces started falling off of his story.
The question for the jury is, did he not want to be there because he had told the police something that wasn't true? Or did he not want to be there because he was going to have to tell the truth against somebody that he liked and admired, Ray Lewis?
All I saw was Ray come up with like that and said, "Knock it off." I didn't see him throw the punch. I didn't see it land or nothing.
With those words, Fassett reversed the fortunes of Lewis. But the question lingered. Why did he change his story?
It's my understanding from people who were there, the detectives said to him in the present tense, "You see Ray there now. Don't you see Ray down there in the killing zone? Can't you see him?" They kept putting words in Dwayne's mouth about Ray. I can tell you that what Dwayne testified to in court under oath was the truth.
He told me about how he had been browbeaten, how he had been intimidated, how he was exhausted, how they were putting words in his mouth, and that Ray Lewis was innocent.
I would think if there was any intimidation that had a lasting effect here, it was intimidation from the defense, turning Fassett away from the police version of what happened and toward a story that would help the defense.
With their case against Lewis under siege, prosecutors struck a deal. They dropped the murder charge in return for Lewis pleading guilty to obstruction of justice and turning state's evidence. Part of his testimony focused on a conversation he had with Sweeting moments after the fight.
He had the knife like in his hand like this. The blade wasn't out or anything like that. He had the knife like this. And I said, "Damn, man, what happened?" He said, "Lulu, every time they hit me, I hit them."
I never told Ray that. I never told Ray that. I did not murder anyone. But when people look at that as two people dead, you automatically got to assume that, you know, somebody is guilty of a crime. And if I find out that anybody in that limo had did that, as far as I'm concerned, they saved my life.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. We, the jury, find defendant not guilty.
Was justice served? No, because 2 men died and nobody's in jail. Do we know what really happened? Do we know if it was self-defense? Well, that was very unclear.
We really don't have a clear idea of what happened that night, thanks to a mediocre police investigation and a very bad job by the prosecutors.
It was a politically motivated trial. The mayor, the county prosecutor, everybody, DA, they're all running for office, and they thought this was their platform to further their political career.
The mayor of Atlanta went on national television, and he said, "We will prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that Ray Lewis took a knife and stabbed 2 people to death." Can Ray Lewis ever overcome that? I'm not sure.
First, I would just like to say that I'm very sorry about the tragedy that occurred in Atlanta. My sympathy goes out to the families, the friends of both of the men that died. I know their hearts are broken.
I'm sure he knows more than he's telling. He knows exactly what happened. He knows who did what and what his involvement was.
My heart and understanding of losing someone, I've had that. If they let me reach out to him, I will. I have children myself. I would never hurt nobody's child.
I think Ray Lewis put himself in a bad place. Knew he was putting himself in a bad place and liked being in a bad place.
Ray might not understand that he is not going to be understood by the majority of the people because he has a greatness about him. And sometimes greatness brings about fear.
During his 15 days in solitary confinement, Ray Lewis stayed active. Each night, he collapsed into sleep only after 1,500 push-ups and 500 sit-ups. When he was released on bond in mid-February to await trial, he was prohibited from drinking alcohol and had to be in his house by 9 p.m.
He was like, yo, worst thing they could have did was put me in my house and lock me up and tell me I got a curfew. He said, now I'm going to be bigger, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to be faster, and I'm going to be the best linebacker they ever seen in their life. He told me that. Straight up.
Ray said, you know what? I'm going to be proven innocent of this. But when I get to camp, I can't take 3-4 weeks to get in shape. Once I step on that football field, all this is going to be behind me.
Ray Lewis came into camp more aggressive, more knowing that his career, his family, and everything would have been taken away from him. So it gave him a more burning desire to be the best at what he does.
He practiced like a wild man every day for the whole year.
Who would have believed the Baltimore Ravens would be in the Super Bowl back in August? Ray Lewis believed it, and he literally willed that defense and that team to get where he needed to go.
In a training camp speech with Jim Brown in August, Lewis opened up to his teammates about the Atlanta incident.
Everybody said, how's Ray doing? How's Ray doing? It's not about Ray. It's about my family. It's about when I walked up out of a courtroom, I didn't care about nothing because I had everybody else around me. Shannon picked me up every day. I didn't have no problems. I didn't worry about court. All I was worried about was helping my team get to the Super Bowl.
I just saw sincerity and strength. So he had to be humble. At the same time, he had to be strong.
He said, I don't care about being linebacker of the year. I don't care about going to the Pro Bowl. At the end of the year, I want to be in town. And when the dust settles, I want us to prove everybody wrong.
Among those he needed to persuade was the power base of the NFL. Before the 2000 season, the league fined Lewis $250,000 for his involvement in the Atlanta incident and threatened him with another $250,000 assessment if he violated his probation.
He played the entire season like a man in search of vengeance.
I remember some of those games, he was taunting himself.
He's begging them. He's doing the Hulk Hogan routine with the ears louder, louder, louder. And the louder they jeered him, the better he played. I'm sitting on the sideline, and I'm watching the guy, and I'm just like, this dude's free. He's unstoppable.
You turn on that film and watch him play, and you say, good God, everybody else is in slow motion.
There were running backs who didn't want to play against Ravens defense because of Ray Lewis. Corey Dillon didn't want to play against the Ravens. Jerome Bettis, Emmitt Smith, all these guys came to town, and Ray Lewis was steamrolling.
As the Ravens marched through the season, they set an NFL record for fewest points allowed in a 16-game season, 165. Spearheading the attack was Lewis, whose 137 tackles led the team for the 5th straight season and won him the league's Defensive Player of the Year award.
The ball's dropped by Georgia, intercepted, and Ray Lewis down the sideline. Touchdown, Ray Lewis on the interception.
After upsetting Tennessee and Oakland on the road to reach the Super Bowl, the wild card Ravens rallied behind Lewis against a national media that wouldn't let go of the murder trial.
As much as some of you want to, we are not going to retry this. It's inappropriate, and you're not qualified.
They ran it over and over and over and over again about the orange coveralls. On TV, the man couldn't comb his hair, in shackles and leg irons. Give him the same kind of press about being Defensive Player of the Year.
I find it inexcusable that that organization, from the top down, from the owner to the coach, went into that Super Bowl and somehow acted like Ray Lewis got a bad deal. Ray Lewis got a raw deal? Compared to who? The dead guy?
Ray was in a no-win situation at the Super Bowl. If he came out and apologized, he wasn't sorry enough. If he didn't come out and apologize, which is what he did, then he really was heartless.
We're trying to win the Super Bowl. We're not here to focus on Ray Lewis. What Ray Lewis went through, that was a year ago. Let it go.
The Super Bowl last year was the only time that I've ever been involved in an interview where I was asking him questions and he was answering me, and I was frightened. Off the field, I think he's a very scary man.
The real truth is, this was never about those 2 kids that's dead in the street. It's about Ray Lewis. And that's the same thing this is about, and that's not right.
If I'm Ray Lewis at the Super Bowl, I am pleading with the world to believe me that I'm innocent, trust me, and I'm sorry.
No matter how much you poke and prod at him, he cannot explain to you in terms that are sufficient for America how sorry he is, other than saying, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I hurt to the depths of my soul. But then when he says it, and he has, people don't believe it.
Who are we to ask him to be sorry for something? Well, this is a civilized society, and I think we have a responsibility as human beings to treat life with dignity. And I thought that week he did not treat life with dignity.
ESPN aired a segment with the victim's brothers, and Ray was disturbed by it.
They want to brush it aside. I'm trying to bring it back out, telling everybody that I believe Ray Lewis killed my brother.
It bothered him deeply. He understood when he saw that he didn't have much of a chance in terms of changing people's minds.
I think Ray needed to rise above the anguished accusations of those families and show that he did have a heart.
Fired to the brim with a bunker mentality, Lewis and his teammates took the field in Tampa for Super Bowl 35 against the Giants.
He grabs his chest, a gesture, and then he leans over and he picks up some of the grass and throws it. He's saying, screw you, America. This is my time. This is my house. This is where I work. These next 3 or 4 hours belong to me.
That dance is called, I believe, the Kirby Shuffle. And that's named after a guy in the neighborhood who did the same kind of dance. And Ray does that to signal to the guys back home, hey, I'm still with you. I'm still with you.
Hey, I brought you this far. Just ride with me. Hop on my back and ride with me. Hop on my back and ride with me.
That defense, and Ray in particular, making that immediate statement that we are out here to harm you and do harm to you.
It's personal today. It's personal. Hey, I'm going to show him what bothered me. I'm going to show him what bothered me.
Everything that everybody was throwing at him all week, he built it into armor. And he put that around him. And he went out there and he said, you can't touch me, you can't hurt me anymore, and I don't care what you said.
The Ravens smothered the Giants 34-7. Baltimore's defense didn't allow a touchdown as Lewis was all over the field. He made 5 tackles and knocked down 4 passes, tipping one that led to an interception.
Hollywood wouldn't take a script like this because no one would have believed it. If they didn't see it unfold before their eyes, no one would believe that a guy can go through what he's been through in 5-6 months and then turn around and have the season that he had.
When people try to toss out the notion that somehow it's an inspiring story, what Ray Lewis did this past year, you wonder how shameless people can be. Whatever difficulties he surmounted by his football performance were difficulties entirely of his own making.
Although Ray Lewis was named MVP of Super Bowl 35, he didn't get the chance to say those famous and profitable words. Instead, it was quarterback Trent Dilfer who said, "I'm going to Disney World."
When everybody turned against Ray Lewis and say Ray Lewis was a murderer and he didn't represent the NFL and, run him all down, a lot of people turned their back. Nobody wanted to associate with Ray. There's no Wheaties box with Ray Lewis' face on it.
The perception of Ray has probably been forever changed by what happened in Atlanta. That's unfortunate. I don't know that he'll ever be able to convince people or show people everywhere what he's really about.
Since his murder trial in Atlanta in 2000, Lewis has become close with NFL veterans Rod Woodson and Shannon Sharpe.
He's gravitated to them, not as the best player on that football team, but as a little brother. Give me guidance.
We try to tell him is that, you have to be real careful about who you choose to friend. Put your shield up, and you make them prove to you that you can trust them. You don't give nobody the benefit of the doubt.
He's gone through a process of introspection with himself. He's gone through and looked at the good, the bad, and the ugly. In our conversations, it's been, Mr. Wright, I'm sorry about what has happened, but I gotta move on with my life. I gotta make sure I don't go down that road again.
I think Ray Lewis is struggling with who Ray Lewis is. And here's a guy whose mom is a Christian, very strong religious background. I think Ray was brought up that way. But yet at the same time, here's a guy who has a lot of money, has a lot of fame early, and he's struggling with the identity.
Ray Lewis thinks he's misunderstood. I, for one, I understand him completely. He's a guy who was at the scene of a murder and that has not yet been solved and didn't want to help solve it and wants us to forget about it and go away and just let him play football. Exactly who he is.
At some point, the majority of the people will forget about the guy in the orange suit and think about the guy that was running Tiki Barber down in the Super Bowl.
Until that murder is solved, people are going to see Ray Lewis running out there, and for every tackle he makes, they're going to be thinking, this guy had something to do with the murder. We don't know what, and we'll never know what.
Did Ray learn a lesson? I hope so. I truly do. Did he learn the lesson that some people in America want him to? Probably not.
Why should Ray Lewis even dream of changing his image in the media or anywhere else? The only thing that we really require of him is to crack through those blubbery slobs on the offensive line and kick the hell out of the quarterback. He keeps doing that, and we'll keep paying him, whether he says he's sorry, whether he says go to hell.
Watching Ray Lewis on the football field for the first time, his high school coach gaped at the power and grace of the 15-year-old who ran down everything. Lewis has been on the attack ever since, running towards ball carriers and quarterbacks, running towards fame and wealth. But he may never be able to outrun the memory of that double homicide in Atlanta after Super Bowl 34. For Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.
It's hot out there, but let's blow them off the line of scrimmage.
For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory.
A blustery November afternoon in Chicago. Time to bundle up and march down to Soldier Field to see if the Chicago Bears once again can hold off impending disaster. Bear fans know how to survive. Their team has been a model of inconsistency since week 2. Yet still, the Bears entertain playoff hopes, with a winning formula serving as a constant reminder of their preseason promise. Today, what it will take is a big performance from this man, NFL rushing leader Walter Payton. Without Payton's 1,129 yards, the Bears and head coach Jack Pardee likely would find themselves among the also-rans. But Payton's magic has shepherded Chicago through tough times, and today could make the difference in a showdown battle. For today, the Bears play host to the Minnesota Vikings, a team with rookie Tommy Kramer and little-used Bob Lee as the only healthy quarterback. Fran Tarkenton's injury has forced Bud Grant to go to the bench to protect his 2-game lead in the NFC Central Division. It's not a prospect Grant cares to smile about. This is a must game for Chicago. The Bears have already lost to Minnesota, and a second loss would wipe out their playoff hopes. But against a wounded Viking team that has been most ineffective stopping the run, you got to like Chicago's chances in the NFL Game of the Week. For the Viking defense, the task at hand was clearly defined. The threat to the Vikings' hold on first place wore number 34. The Vikings' job was to stop him. But on the first play from scrimmage, Walter Payton foreshadowed things to come. On the replay, watch Payton slide outside the block of number 65, Noah Jackson, for 29 yards and a first down in Viking territory. Payton and Jackson would work in tandem much of the afternoon. Jackson pulling to eliminate obstacles, Payton reaping the rewards. On Chicago's first possession,